All right. Hello and welcome. My name is Doug Davidoff. I am the founder and CEO at Imagine Business Development. I will be presenting today. Welcome to this edition of the Sales Genius Network webinar series. Today, we are talking about the 3 playbooks for a successful sales development program. Now, I do have to share with you that I am probably more excited to share this with you than I am with most of the webinars that we do. And I'll admit that I probably say that frequently because the fun part about doing these things is we put original information together for these things. And we actually finished the deck last night. Well, I guess technically we finished the deck about 5 minutes ago because we made one more last edition. And as we were putting this deck together, I'll tell you, I got excited. It actually helped to clarify some things that we've been working on as well. So we've already learned from it, and I'm excited to be able to share it with you. The plan is going to be that we're going to walk through the program. If you have any questions, feel free to chat them. We've got our director of operations here as well today. Jess is going to be keeping an eye on the chats as well. If you chat the question, I'll try to weave in an answer if it makes sense to the overall material that we're talking about. We should have time left at the end for any questions that you have about what we share today or anything else. Of course, we are always available if you have questions if you don't have time to ask them today. So with all that said, with the particulars out of the way, let's get started. Today's topic, the 3 playbooks for successful sales development. I am going to be talking about this through the lens of sales development and having a sales development program. The term that your company may use or you may be familiar with may be business development, sales development rep, business development reps. I'm seeing some people calling them conversational development reps. A sales development program is a program where you have a team dedicated to early stage, often what we traditionally in sales refer to as prospecting. You have a dedicated team that's focused on the pre-sales qualified lead stage of the sales process, developing the market, working leads, either responding to inbound leads or outbound leads to generate high quality sales conversations. So we are going to be talking about it from the perspective of a sales development program. But I want you to know that what we'll be talking about will absolutely apply even if you don't have a sales development program. If you've got what are, I think they're now called full cycle reps, account executives. If your sales team is responsible for managing the sale and they're responsible for generating new opportunities, prospecting, this is going to apply equally well. We've seen a lot of people doing a lot of things to accelerate their growth. And I got to tell you, the number one takeaway that I've gotten watching this over the last 3 to 5 years is, man, people are working hard. Sales executives, marketing executives, salespeople, marketers, sales operations. I mean, if you are on the market-facing, customer-facing side of the business, I think you're working harder than anybody in those roles have ever worked before. And I'm not going to say something trite like you need to stop working harder and you need to start working smarter, because I think for the most part, people are working smart. And what's happening is increasingly working smart's not enough. We got to work smart and incredibly hard. And why is that? And here's what we're seeing. And the reason we start with the customer acquisition platform today is we are working so hard to optimize each aspect of what we're doing that we're not paying attention to the whole, right? So whether you've got a dedicated sales development team, dedicated sales development function, or prospecting as a part of a broader sales structure, it's important that whatever you're doing is designed to optimize for the complete complex system that customer acquisition is. Now today we're going to telescope on these 2 areas within the customer acquisition process. Lead generation, lead penetration into lead management, and that lead conversion is kind of where the sales development or prospecting stage ends. But keep in mind, while that is a core part of the customer acquisition process, for it to work, it has to be built on a continuous improvement, continuous feedback system. Whoops, I got a very sensitive mouse here. On a continuous feedback system, but also it has to be designed to align with all the other aspects of what you're doing. Or what happens is the harder you work in one area, as other areas work equally hard, you actually create greater negative friction. You create greater conflict. You begin to pull in slightly different directions. And the only way you're able to overcome that is with greater force. And it's that focus on force that is causing people and causing organizations to work as hard, to spend as much, and to take as much risk as they're taking for the results that they're getting. So with the preface of you have to solve for the whole in mind, let's dig into the whole aspect of market engagement. And this is the challenge. Frankly, it's confronted sales and marketing executives since the beginning of sales and marketing disciplines. And that is at any given time, in any given market, just about everybody's not paying attention to you. Right? I had a coach early in my sales career. He said to me, Doug, everybody wakes up with the same goal in mind. I said, really, what's that? He said, they don't want to meet you. Right? And we have to realize, we have to accept that in any given market, 80 to 90%, they're satisfied, which means they at least think that they're happy, or probably even more likely they're neutral. They're just not thinking about it. They're focused on other things. They're focused on their issues. They're trying to get answers to questions that they have. They're trying to solve problems that they've identified. Having done a number of ride-alongs where I get to observe salespeople selling, also doing a number of buyer-seller debriefs, and the research behind it, it is absolutely amazing how bad we are on the market-facing side of both predicting not just what people are going to do, but why they're going to do it. But we're not just bad at predicting why they're going to do what they do. We're bad at debriefing after they've done it, why they've actually done it. And we think that the buyer's doing things with aspects of intent that we have that they typically don't. And so one of the things that's really important through all of this is how do we connect? That is the market opportunity that will enable us to begin to reduce the amount of force that we need to drive greater velocity and to drive greater momentum. 80 to 90% not thinking about what we do one way or the other. 10 to 15%, they're in the earlier phases of consideration. They're in the process of deciding if they're going to do something. And then, right about 3 to 10%, well, they're actively engaged in a buying process of some form. So at any given time, in any given market, a very small percentage of the people that we want to do business with are looking to do business. And if you have studied physics, this will not come as news to you. The first law of motion, the law of inertia, says a body at rest tends to stay at rest. A body in motion tends to keep moving along at a constant speed in a straight line path unless interfered with by some external force. Right? That's what market engagement is all about. Now remember, a body at rest stays at rest. A body in motion stays in motion. If you've ever slowed down instead of coming to a full stop at a red light, you know what I'm talking about. You know how much faster you can accelerate, even if it's an almost imperceptible roll than if the car is fully stopped. And that is what market development is all about. Market development is about getting that initial stage of movement. Here's a fact, whether we want to admit it or not. Buyers buy on their terms. Buyers buy on their time. Right? We can influence a little bit. Frankly, the biggest area we can influence is to create awareness of issues and situations that should cause action. But buyers aren't going to do anything until a level of intent emerges that triggers them to do something. The problem that sales organizations have, and why we have to work so hard, well, we have to work so hard because we have to work so fast, because we're not doing a whole lot in these early stages to cause movement or to guide that movement. So by the time we become aware of something, that buyer, that prospect is typically so deep into their intent stage that we have to react to them, right? And you guys know, if you're in a reactive place, you better react quickly, because if you don't react quickly, that opportunity is going to be gone. And one of the reasons that we're doing this is because, well, the data tells us we're supposed to do this. Right? I'm sure we've all seen the research, whether it's from the Sales Executive Council, Forrester, CSO. I'm forgetting the other ones who have done it. 57%, 65%. I've seen all kinds of different numbers. The number almost doesn't matter. It really comes down to the buyer is on the way out of their process before they naturally proactively reach out to talk to salespeople. We've all heard no one wants to talk to salespeople until they've decided what they want, the whole 0 moment of truth, the whole self journey, etc. Right? We've bought that as a law of business, and so we're all running more and more to try to fight for the opportunities later and later in the cycle, which means we get into a more reactive position. We have to move faster. Life becomes less predictable. That has a burn on us. That's why we're working so hard. That's why it's so expensive. By the way, if you're competing here in late stages, that is a very expensive place to compete, right? No question about it, because everything is urgent there. But here's the problem with this mindset. It's a myth. It's only partially true. Let's dig deeper into the data. Right? Yes, when you interview buyers and when you talk to buyers, you learn that 80% don't want to connect to salespeople, don't want to connect with sales before. I'm trying to paraphrase my research and then I'm reading it. 80% of buyers want to connect with sales during the consideration or decision stage, after they've researched options, after they've come up with a short list, which is another way of saying 80% don't want to talk to sellers before that stage. Yet 50% of buyers say they have incomplete, unclear, or poorly defined decision criteria. And 53% say that they postpone decisions on at least half of their purchases. And some of the latest research that I've seen is showing roughly 35-40% of purchasing processes, which could also be defined as sales processes, are ending in a no decision. We're not losing to a competitor. We're losing to them not ever making a decision. Let's dig deeper. These same buyers, 73%, say they are willing to meet. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, they desire to meet with salespeople earlier than the consideration phase if they help me define my problems and needs, tell me something I didn't know about my category or my competitors, provide me with objective information and help me frame my decision, challenge my way of doing business by highlighting a pain point or organizational need we weren't aware of. 33% say they'll favor a vendor that shows me a new way of solving an established problem. And 66% say that vendors that take such an approach help them shorten their purchasing decision or sales cycle. That is all research from a 2019 study from the Aberdeen Group on demystifying B2B purchase intent. Let me give you the bad news, because I've talked to a lot of sales organizations. I've talked to a lot of go-to-market organizations. I've talked to a lot of demand generation organizations, and they all tell me the same thing. Oh, yeah. We're focused on the early stage. Oh, yeah. We've got great content. Yeah, we're influencing. Recent research done by the Challenge Performance Optimization Company. They're basically the spinoff of CEB when Gartner bought CEB, the challenger area of CEB. Recent research from them shows that sellers only play a role in problem identification 11% of the time, basically 1 in 10 times. Sellers are influencing problem identification 1 out of 10 times. we're not having influence when the motion starts. We're not having influence where that motion goes. That's why we're having to work so hard. And that's why this is no surprise. 98% of MQLs never result in closed business. 64% of salespeople's time is wasted on admin responsibilities. 54% of sales reps won't make quota this year. Right? That's all true because we are in such a reactive position. And when you're dealing with these types of numbers, what that means is you need more force, you need more volume. And how do you get more force and volume? You work harder, you spend more, you take more risk. And you're doing all of that, and the net output of it isn't adding up. The juice isn't worth the squeeze today. And we see that across the board. If we look at employee engagement numbers, if we look at employee satisfaction numbers, we are in the hottest economy of our lifetime. And the stress level about performance is higher than it's ever been. This is not a sustainable path. We have to do something different. There's something wrong when all this is going on. And what's wrong is not that we're doing the wrong things. It's that we're often doing the right things at the wrong time or in the wrong place. We don't have to revolutionize what we do. We just have to change the mindset and the model of what we do. Let's talk about developing the market. Let's talk about planning in the spring so that we can harvest in the fall. Let's talk about core principles of business that frankly have always worked. Here's what we're looking for. We're looking for momentum. We're looking for lift. How do you get lift? Well, if you think about your customer acquisition process, we talk about it as a single process, but it's actually three distinct processes, right? The first one we call demand generation. That's all about getting the attention and engagement of your target audience. Now think about this for a moment. If I don't know who you are, or I haven't engaged with you in some fashion, if I'm not paying active attention to you, it is highly, highly unlikely that I'm going to buy from you. Right? So your growth right off the bat is just going to be limited by the amount of attention and engagement that you are creating. And engagement is active attention. The more of the right people that are actively paying attention to you, the easier it is for the next phase of your process, your sales process. That's all about acquiring customers, turning prospects into customers. Now, you see here that I separate customer acquisition from revenue acquisition. A lot of times they happen at the same time, but they're really two different things. The revenue acquisition process is, the delivery of the promise. Now, increasingly as more and more companies are moving to recurring revenue models or programmatic sales models, customer success truly generates revenue, and revenue is generated long after someone becomes a customer. In many cases, someone becomes a customer and there's a whole rollout or execution process that can take weeks or even months before revenue starts to be generated. And that's what the customer success process is all about. And so if we want to grow revenue and we don't want to have to be in this vicious cycle of increasing force to do so, then we've got to generate lift. We've got to generate momentum. And that means we have to generate engagement at a faster rate than we're generating customers. And we have to generate customers at a faster rate than we're generating revenue, right? And when we're focused so late in the process, what's happening is as we're accelerating our growth rate, as we're accelerating our customer acquisition rate, it's actually growing at a faster rate than the engagement rate is growing, which means we're building a harder ramp. We're increasing the effort and energy ramp that needs to be expended to support that growth rate. When not only do we have to maintain or increase that growth rate, let's remember the laws of math. As we get bigger, the percentage might be the same, but the absolute number gets significantly larger. Right? We need to be thinking about our funnel in a very different mindset. Too often, we have this idea of this first funnel, right? So one is, attention into engagement. That's the top of your funnel. to the middle of the funnel, and then we get down here into sales opportunities and closed business. And this is what most funnels look like. They're really, really heavy at the top and really, really light in the middle and the bottom. And this is what requires more and more force to be able to grow that rate. And that's what's exhausting us. We need to move to broaden that middle and early stages. And the more that we're growing, and I should say to you, if I were to show you the details of this model, you'll see while the width of stage 2 is the same, the absolute number is much, much larger. So by the time we get here, our level 3 in the funnel is about the size of level 1 in this first funnel, right? As this gets wider, as we generate more breadth, we create that momentum, we create that lift. That's what market development is all about. But if you were to look at just about any sale, and certainly any B2B sale, you're going to see it's going to go through these 7 stages in pretty much this order, right? We need to generate attention, first action. We need to have meaningful conversations. We need to connect to important pain points, areas that matter. There's a commitment to investigate. The customer says, we need to do something. We need to think about this. We need to decide, are we going to do something about this? There's a commitment to solve. We need to solve this problem. We need to do something. The business case gets built. The decision is made and a purchase happens. Right? Those first 3 stages, that's the outreach stage. That's where the leverage is. That's what development is all about. So when we talk about development, we're talking about outreach. And whether that's outbound, inbound, allbound, I don't care. But outreach is where that leverage is. Outreach is where we cultivate. Outreach is where we soften. Outreach is where we generate momentum, we generate lift. Once the customer is at that first commit stage, we call it intent 1. Once they're there, now we're in sales. Right now we're managing the customer acquisition process. Right? But if we're not doing things in the early stages, then a body at rest tends to stay at rest. The body gets into motion totally unrelated to us. And if we're not there when that motion starts, as that motion picks up momentum, or I should, technically as that motion picks up mass, if we're going to be correct by the laws of physics, it's harder and harder to move. Right? And so as that customer manages that self journey and realize we're only influencing the actions that get somebody to this stage 11% of the time, 90% of the time, they're here or later before your sellers are engaged with them, before you're actually influencing them. And so if what they're looking for is not an automatic match, then you need more force to move it. Whereas you could have influenced it here with much less force. That's what development is all about, right? But very rarely is that how we're looking at our sales development, business development, market development functions. You see, when you're looking at a sales process, what you're going to see is there's really 3 sales that take place. The first sale is defining the problem. The second sale is defining the solution, and the third sale is defining who we're going to buy from. And we just completed a research project. We reviewed more than 150 sales playbooks. I can tell you, we're so sale 3 focused that in many cases, we're not even aware that there's a sale 1 or sale 2. This is where the buyer, frankly, does a pretty poor job. It's why more than 50% of them are saying we have unclear criteria. We have ambiguous understanding of what it is that we're looking for, because the problem was never clearly defined. And if the problem's not clearly defined, then the solution can't be clearly defined. Trade-offs can't be managed. Buyers get overwhelmed. Sellers get sucked into chaos. And then we wonder why we're working so hard, right? Orienting our customer acquisition, our revenue acquisition approach, realizing that this is what is happening, right? I'm not suggesting that we need to do this from a tactical standpoint. I mean, I am suggesting that, but it's not just because, hey, this is a really great, cool sales advantage. And if you do this, right, that's true, but that's not why I'm sharing it. I'm sharing this because this is what is actually happening. You know, for the last 20 years, we've been talking more and more and more and more seriously about alignment. And that means we have to align to what is actually happening. And if you look at your sales process, if you look at the stress points in your sales process, if you look at your sales career, and this is true whether you're on the marketing or the sales side, and you look at all those stress points, I promise you're going to see it's because this is what was actually happening. And this is where steps were skipped, we were out of alignment and so forth. So to align that way, we've got to orient ourselves. We've got to develop the right playbook to win the right game. Now, I use this next slide in a lot of different ways, and I will give you a disclaimer that I am not a Patriots fan. I respect the hell out of Tom Brady as a quarterback, but I'm not a Tom Brady fan. I would be a Tom Brady fan if he were on my team, just so we're clear. I say oftentimes, I bet you Tom Brady would be a great quarterback even if we played football the way we did when we were kids, right? We drew out our plays on our hands and we said, hey, you go to the car, go left, and so forth. But I'm actually showing this for a different reason today. I think we can all agree, whether we like it or not, whether we like him or not, whether we're a fan of his or not, that he is one of, if not the greatest quarterback of all time. But what if you were running a veer offense? What if you were running the wishbone? What if you needed a quarterback that was highly mobile, agile, and fast? Right? If you've ever seen Remember the Titans or We Are Marshall, those are two movies where both of those football teams ran the veer offense. I think we would all agree that Tom Brady may in fact be the greatest quarterback of all time, but he's not the quarterback we would use to run that offense. And that's what we're doing in sales all the time. Now, we oftentimes don't have good playbooks. We oftentimes don't have the right person in the right position. But what we're doing a lot of is we're doing the right things in the wrong game, right? You don't want to have a personnel and a game plan of the Patriots if you're playing a veer offense, if the game is the veer, right? And so when we think about market development, when we think about prospecting, when we think about sales development, there are in fact 3 games. Now in reality, there's more than 3 games. But I wanted to make sure that this webinar was a fairly limited period of time. So I basically put it into the 3 major archetypes of sales development. And so basically speaking, what you got is three forms, 3 games. Programmatic, what we call target and cultivate, and ABM, which I'm adding named accounts to it because ABM is so freakishly overused as a term that it almost doesn't mean anything today. Programmatic is what we think of as sales development. Aaron Ross came out with a book, Predictable Revenue. Great book, amazing process, amazing program. Big fan of it. While it's done a lot of good, it's also done a lot of bad. And the bad that it's done is that's what everyone thinks sales development is. And everybody's running that game. We're running it if we run sales development. We're also running that game basically when we're doing prospecting. Programmatic is designed for high-speed, short-cycle situations. Target and cultivate is designed for more moderate to long cycles. And ABM, named accounts, those are designed for long cycles. And I'm talking about this from a development standpoint, not from an advertising standpoint. If you want to run a true account-based sales strategy and you don't have a long sales cycle, then that is likely not the best sales strategy for you to run. Right? So you're going to be dealing with big purchases, big ticket, high ASV, long cycle. So how do you know which game you should play? What are the considerations to determine which playbook is the right playbook for you? There are 7 considerations to consider. That was a little bit redundant. The first is, what are you selling? What type of innovation are you selling? Are you selling a continuous innovation or a discontinuous innovation? Meaning, continuous innovation means your customer is still going to be doing the same basic things they were doing before. They're just going to do it with your stuff instead of somebody else's stuff. Discontinuous innovation means they're going to change what they're doing, right? The change more than just using your product or using your software or using your people. I mean, that's certainly change and we can't diminish that. there's always a bit of discontinuity in there. But what I'm talking about is, it's going to involve a change of approach. It's going to involve them doing things they haven't done before. To really realize the advantage of what you're bringing to them, the customer is going to have to do something different. Whereas in continuous innovation, the customer doesn't have to do anything different. Right? So that's point number one. Second, what's the average sale value? Now, this is where it can get kind of crazy, because I work with some companies that, they sell everything from $5,000 to $2 million. And the problem is they got one sales strategy, one approach for the whole thing. What we did there was we actually segmented their business, right? So they have a very, very high ASV, and in that case, they're moving to a full ABM approach. They're actually playing all three playbooks because they've got distinctly different segments. And so now they've got the right processes, the right people in the right place for the right game in the right situation. It reduces the friction considerably, right? What's your average sale value? Bigger tickets, more expensive, tends to require more consideration, tends to be more complex. What type of offering are you selling? Are you a product versus a service? Are you replacing something that already exists versus adding a new capability? Is it a simple sale versus a complex sale? Those are all things that are going to determine which game you should be playing. Where are you in the product life cycle? Right? If you're in the early majority to late majority, that's going to make you much more likely that it's going to be more of a continuous innovation. What people are looking for is going to be different. Anyone that's read Crossing the Chasm, you know what I'm talking about. What's your purchase cycle? Right? Every purchase goes through these stages, but they take different paths to get there. And oftentimes I see companies involved in multi-year purchase cycles. And if we look at the ebb and flow of how the customer, the prospect, thinks in a multi-year purchase cycle, at the beginning of a purchase cycle, which is, the beginning of one is the end of another, a purchase gets made, attention and engagement is very, very high because an active decision is being made. It quickly wanes off and then goes through a period of time with almost no attention or engagement. Then, you're in that middle third and the attention and engagement begins to pick up, right? Now, it doesn't pick up purposefully or consciously necessarily about the purchase, but things begin to happen. The business has changed. The product has probably gone through some change. Misalignment begins to emerge. Business problems get identified. The realization that a new contract cycle is about to kick off. And then ultimately it comes back up in crescendos again to go through the same process. Here's the thing. This is the opportunity if you want demand creation. And so if you're involved in multi-year purchase cycles where you're looking to influence, if you're influencing late, it's too late. If you're selling a large, important, process-driven solution, you've got to be there while the idea is being born. And if you wait too long, you're going to be in a position of weakness. So how long is the purchase cycle? What's the nature of the purchase cycle? What's your positioning? Are you a brand leader? If you're IBM, you can do a lot less selling. At least IBM decades ago. We can make an argument today. Are you a challenger? Do I know who you are? Right. If you're a new business or a relatively small business, if you're not a dominant market player, when your salespeople call up and they say, "Hi, this is Doug Davidoff from Widgets R Us," that doesn't have the same impact if I were to call and say, "Hi, this is Doug Davidoff from Hewlett Packard." Right. And so we can't expect the response rate to be the same if I'm calling from a leader with great awareness versus a company that they may not have heard of. And then the last consideration is how much existing in-market demand, and when I talk about demand, I mean intent. I mean, there are people that are actively looking to buy, right? Are there lines at people's doors, or do you need to generate your own line? And so these are the considerations: the degree of change involved to be able to realize the benefit, the average sale value, what type of offering are you selling, Where are you in the product life cycle? What's your purchase cycle? What's your positioning? And what level of existing demand is there? Now, if you're doing programmatic development or programmatic prospecting, which I want to emphasize is the dominant form of sales development and prospecting that's taking place right now, like dominant to the tune of 80 to 90% of the prospecting that takes place. I want you to understand that it works extraordinarily well in the right situation and does not work extraordinarily well in the wrong situation. It might generate sales qualified leads. It might even generate increased sales, but you burn your addressable market, you burn your people, and every year gets a lot harder. This is the right market. This is the right playbook. If you're selling something that's relatively low change, low disruption. So by the way, remember, for any of you that have read Predictable Revenue, and if you haven't, I'll give you a quick summary of it. This was the story of what Aaron Ross did in a key area of the business when Salesforce was selling CRM to small and smaller mid-market companies. Now, realize Salesforce was not a new CRM to them. These were companies, by and large, that were using desktop or network-based CRM. CRM was a dominant item in the late 90s and early 2000s, right? I would buy the CRM and I would be able to still use the CRM, right? Key consideration, what's the average ASV? Programmatic sales development works lower ASV. The higher ASV you go, the less likely sales development is really going to drive a result for you. One of the primary benefits of Salesforce to the small and mid-market was by going to the cloud and going to a subscription fee instead of buying the software product up front, you could move from a capital expense to an operating expense. It was a lower annual average sale value. Programmatic works much better if you're selling a product versus a service, and if you're replacing something that's already happening. There's already a line item for this. This is something that we're already doing. You're better in the majority life cycle. So when you're in the, you're at the pragmatist and later, early majority, late majority, even potentially into the laggard. It does not work as well when you're in the early adopter or early majority phase. It can begin to work in the early majority phase, but not so much. If the purchase cycle is a short purchase cycle or you're only looking to get in late. So, if you're in a highly defined market, like marketing automation, like accounting software, you might have a business that's got a long purchasing cycle, but for the most part, the criteria are set. And so you're selling typically the lower cost alternative, right? Better, faster, less expensive. And better meaning that it just does something better, not that you have to do something different. Then oftentimes you don't have to get into until late because you don't really need to influence the decision criteria. The decision criteria already play to your advantage. So you're looking to get in late. You're looking to get in when there's a high predisposition to do something. The positioning is also stronger when you're a leader versus a challenger. And when there is strong awareness outside. By the way, if you're not generating a pretty high volume of lead generation, then your sales development, inbound lead generation, whether you're formally doing inbound or not, then programmatic sales development is going to be hard because it's pretty likely that there's not a strong awareness of who you are. Salesforce was a well-known brand, was a well-known product. In the phase of Predictable Revenue. And again, I take nothing away from Predictable Revenue. He literally wrote the book on programmatic sales development. And then the last piece is their strong existing intent, right? People were actively buying and actively making changes to their CRM. Businesses were actively moving from network-based software to cloud-based software, right? That's what made that work so well. And it still works really well when these are the conditions. The target and cultivate approach. Here we're into a moderate to high change or disruption. Yeah, there is going to be change involved. There is an educational component to it. We need to get involved and influence in them early. It is going to be multiple conversations, moderate to high sale values. This is where service offerings make sense. It is hard to do programmatic sales development on a service offering because there's a breadth and a customized discovery that has to take place. So as you move towards service, as you move towards value added, as you move towards we are providing you new capabilities, we're going to enable you to do things that you can't do right now, the programmatic model works less effectively, and you need to start playing into the target and cultivate or the ABM playbook. The target and cultivate program approach is really good on the first half of the life cycle curve. It begins to be less effective on the latter part of the life cycle curve because, by the way, by the time you're on the latter half of the curve, you're not looking for disruptive innovation. You're not looking for discontinuous innovation. You're looking to replace something that you're already doing. So there's almost no such thing as late majority new capability. It works great with longer sales cycles. As a matter of fact, if you do it, it will lengthen your sales cycle. It may not lengthen the buying cycle, but it will lengthen your sales cycle because you will get in earlier. And so you'll be there for a longer period of time. So your sales cycle will actually get longer. It works extraordinarily well if you're in a challenger role, you're not the market leader, or there's low awareness, and if there's low or variant existing demand, I should say existing intent. If there's really high existing intent that you match up to, then again, the programmatic model is what you should be doing because you're just looking. The programmatic model captures the low-hanging fruit. That is what it's designed to do. The people who have basically already decided that they need what you have, they just either don't know that you have it, don't know that you're there, or they just need to be nudged. That's what the programmatic model captures. If that doesn't exist or if that's not big enough, you've got to go to a higher fidelity approach, which is the target and cultivate game. All right. The last one is the ABM named accounts. So you're not doing ABM unless it's named accounts. And what that means is that every sales rep has a list of specific accounts that they are pursuing business with. It is a limited, targeted list of accounts. This approach works really well with very high change, high disruption. By the way, less change, less disruption. Even if there's a set number of customers, the ABM development approach might not be the right one for you. You might be better off with the target and cultivate because if there's not a higher level of change, then you don't need to do the level of customization necessarily that drives success in this game. The SV is high to very high. If you're going to do true ABM, it is expensive, right? You are investing in the accounts that you're looking to acquire. So they need to have the value for that. It works with complex offerings. By the way, it doesn't work really well with simple offerings. It can work in any phase of the product lifecycle. It's designed for longer cycles. Again, if you don't have long cycles, then you probably don't need this approach of account-based. It's great for challenger. Now it works for leader, but you don't necessarily need it for leader. Again, I'm not saying don't do it with leader. It also works well with strong awareness. If it's low awareness, you might be better off working a target and cultivate approach initially to begin to soften and generate some awareness. You're also going to want to do some go-to-market to create some awareness. And the reason that I say that is to do this strategy to generate awareness. In some cases, it makes sense, but it is a very expensive way to do it. And then again, it also works very well with low existing intent. Once again, if there's really high intent, if you want to sell to IBM and IBM is looking to buy what you do, then you want to orient to that. You're not going to do a longer cycle development approach, right? So those are the considerations to determine which game is the right game for you. So now let's talk about building the playbook. How do we build the right playbook to win predictably? All right, if you're going to play the programmatic game, you want to be looking at a situation where you've got thousands of targeted companies. You've got an SDR or you're doing full cycle prospecting. And I'm going to suggest that the SDR model is the better programmatic model. It's really hard to be a full cycle rep, to be an account executive that is highly attuned to specific situations and to execute the programmatic model. By the way, the programmatic model is built on the idea of very, very large numbers, right? If I flip a coin 10,000 times, it's going to be heads pretty close to 5,000 of those times. But if I flip it 10 times, it's going to be far more variant for how close it is to 5 times coming up heads. So when you don't have the volume, programmatic doesn't work as well because the results will be variant and unpredictable. They're independent, and what I mean by that is prospecting is going on. Your full cycle sales, your sales process is going on. There's not a super high level of coordination. And in sales and marketing alignment, while they need to be aligned from a messaging and positioning perspective, marketing is doing marketing, and in programmatic, your sales development is doing sales development. There's not they work in parallel. There's less orchestration. Programmatic by definition involves low personalization. It tends to run on high touch, what I call sprints. So very, very high touch over sometimes very, very short periods of time, certainly over weeks, nothing longer than weeks. It works best if there's a strong inbound and or a targeted outbound. By the way, the less inbound that you're getting, that's an awareness issue very often. And so you'll see your results hampered. Not saying you can't do it on a pure outbound basis, but understand that that's going to involve a longer ramp. Target and cultivate. You're thinking more in terms of hundreds. I'm talking about being actively, being active in a development or prospecting effort. So programmatic, you're looking to have thousands. Target and cultivate, you're looking to have hundreds. Again, SDR or full cycle prospecting. So you got a sales development team, or your full cycle is prospecting. If your rep is prospecting and selling, so this is probably the right game for them. Here again, prospecting and selling are more independent, but sales and marketing become much more highly aligned. Marketing and demand generation is creating the content and the tactics that enables the prospecting effort to really play and to really matter. You've got a moderate level of customization and personalization of your messaging, and the approach is more of an interval approach where you're running various plays over a period of months. ABM named accounts. You've got tens of companies active. I once had somebody who said they wanted to take a full ABM approach, and they had 1,000 companies that they want to target. And I said, well, you better have a lot of money and a lot of people. The account-based approach is truly orchestration. It's an SDR and an account executive and an executive team all working in combination, prospecting together. Highly aligned and integrated marketing, demand generation, and sales. It is built on deep research, one-to-one customization. You are writing messaging to the company, and what you're saying to one company is different than what you're saying to another company. If you don't need that level of customization, you're probably going to be better off running a target and cultivate game. And in an ABM approach, you're running campaigns and plays over months or even years. If you're looking to run a programmatic approach, the critical factors for success are you need to have a very large target addressable market, and a very large database. There needs to be a high lead intent volume, meaning there need to be a lot of people that are already in the late consideration phase or later. They are actively looking. You need absolutely, positively, crystal clear definitions of what is a sales qualified lead. And for this approach to really work, you need to have multiple SDRs. I'm not saying you can't do it with one or two, but remember, this is a game played on running up the numbers. This is much more of the numbers game of development. Ideally, you've got 5 or more sales development reps for this game to run predictably and profitably. The other critical success factor is you need to have very strong automation design. Fail points: if the lead definitions are ambiguous or poor, it will lead to chaos, and it will become a very negative experience for the customer, and it will create a lot of friction. If you're sending out crappy emails or meaningless emails, it's going to hurt. If you're not using content in programmatic, you're just doing flat out cold calling. Content is still needed here. Again, not as orchestrated as Target and Cultivate, but you need to have strong, meaningful emails. Process gaps and clean data. If you've got process gaps or your data is not clean, it is going to lead to havoc. Remember, this is a high volume game. And so if you don't have clean data, you're going to be prospecting people that are in a closing stage, and that's going to create some anger. And the handoffs that are occurring and the process that's happening, if it's not built right, again, it's going to become a high friction process for the buyer, and that's going to trigger difficulties. It's really, really easy in the programmatic approach for your people to be selling appointments. And if you sell appointments, that's going to create lots of problems. And what I mean by that is you're pushing appointments as opposed to generating truly sales qualified leads. Remember, if there's not a high level of intent in the programmatic game, the dominant game, then it's highly unlikely that that piece of business is going to turn into revenue in the time period that the rep that gets the lead needs to turn that into revenue. And then the last point is message conflict. You might be positioning yourself one way and then you start going outbound and you become super transactional, or you send shitty emails, things like that. Key metrics, you're going to want to track connects. How many times do we connect? Does our SDR connect with the person that we intended to connect to? How many meetings did we set? How many meetings were held? Those are the qualification meetings. How many SQLs were generated? Sales qualified leads were generated. And how many SQLs were accepted? Target and cultivate. Critical success factors. You have to have strong company and contact data. You are going to work hundreds of companies, and you're going to work typically 2 to 5 contacts within that company. You need to have a strong point of view. Winning the target and cultivate game and the ABM game is being able to talk to people when they're not looking to buy. You need to have a strong educational slant. You need to bring something to the table. You need to have a clearly defined journey progression so you know, and your sellers know, and your marketers know where somebody is in their journey and what does that mean. Strong lead management protocols, process, and pipeline. You should be tracking a lead management pipeline, a pre-sales pipeline. And you need strong process and internal communications so that it feels like an orchestrated, whole, low friction experience for your prospects and customers. If you're not relevant when they're not looking to do anything, you're going to waste a lot of time and money. If you've got poor process or alignment, which typically results in you trying to push the prospect too far, too fast. So what you end up doing is you take the rep out of programmatic, but you don't take programmatic out of the rep. That will lead to havoc. That will lead to frustration. If you don't have strong talk tracks, if I don't sound like I know what I'm talking about, it's going to fail. If you have no content or poor content, it will not work. You need strong content. You need good message, and you need good automation. Here, you're going to be targeting target accounts. How many active target accounts do we have? How many are we pursuing? How many of them are engaged? What's the lead management velocity, which is a measurement of value and progression? We're going to be doing a webinar on sales velocity coming up soon. We recommend that you move the definition away from sales qualified leads and we begin to talk about sales qualified conversations, right? That's what we're looking to do. Getting the conversation with the rep at the right time. And the single most important metric in sales, meaningful conversations, more on that in a second. Named accounts, a highly targeted target list, a depth and breadth mindset. You're going to be dealing with tens of people per account. Highly personalized point of view. You don't have a point of view. You have an account-based point of view, and you need outreach orchestration. Any ambiguity, lack of knowledge, or process gap will lead to failure. Content is crucially important in the named account game, as is automation. Same basic metrics as target and cultivate, although you want to add a target engagement breadth. So we're looking at the breadth of the account as well as the depth of the account. How many people? How deep? What is a meaningful conversation? This is like the number one metric to use. A meaningful conversation is when a salesperson learns at least one piece of material information that allows us to personalize the experience and both parties commit to do something. Our research shows this is the number one indicator of increased sales. Real quick, in our last couple of minutes, let's talk about the cadence, right? When we think about cadences, They really fall into two types. There's the programmatic approach and there's the targeted approach. So target and cultivate and ABM named accounts are both targeted approaches. In the programmatic approach, we are working sprints, right? We're putting people through call, outbound, a whole bunch of different actions to get the connect. And if we don't get it, they move into a passive state and we work the next list and they get enrolled sometimes at some point in the future. As you move to the targeted approach, what you're doing is you're pulling out more of the conversation, right? So if you think about those first 3 steps, these are the 6 steps in the outreach process. Depending upon the level of complexity that you're dealing with, you're going to need to have 3 to 9 meaningful conversations before it becomes a bona fide sales opportunity. You need to have the wherewithal and the system to do that right. By the way, that might sound like a lot. I promise you, it will lower your costs and it will shorten your time to revenue, because what you're doing is pushing all of these in the end where you're in a highly reactive position where it's a much higher cost situation. You're going to be running contextual plays, different types of plays based upon the situation, right? A play is a series of activities over a defined period of time that fits in the context of the prospect with a defined objective and integrates with other activities and future plays, right? We're working more of a ongoing process, what I like to think of as a interval process, right? We're going to be working leans, moving to a passive. So this is basically a 1-quarter campaign where we work a set of accounts, move them to a passive level, then re-enroll them in the future. Those are the keys to playing the right game the right way. If you found anything here relevant, if you want to know how does this apply to you, where does this impact you, want to give you the opportunity to take us up on what we call the Revenue Acceleration Readiness Assessment. This is basically a quick checkup, if you will, to look at some of the key activities that you're taking to identify where might there be some issues that you need to address to be able to accelerate revenue. There is no fee for this assessment. We offer it to anybody who has gone through one of our programs like this. And as a reminder, don't forget about the Sales Genius Network, webinars like this on demand, playbook workbooks so that you can design your own playbooks, scripts, other various tools, resources to help you take advantage of what we're talking about today. We just talked and shared about a lot of things here. Hopefully you can understand why I was as excited as I was to share this with you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today. Please know if we can ever be of any help or assistance to you, don't hesitate to reach out. Until next time, here is to your growth journey. Thanks for joining us.